he had learned in school. So they got into some discussions about that, and so it was appropriate for my dad to go off by himself, as opposed to when I went into practice with my dad. There was a higher level of respect, I think, from me, because I don't know what the relationship was between those two guys, but with me, I was absorbed with learning the techniques that my dad had. He was as good or better than anybody that I had during my dental procedures. I'm having a breakup of my voice.
Yeah, well,
I'll get it back. There it is.
we can edit
That out.
edit some of this stuff out. Yeah, I don't know that there's anything here on your dad or your grandpa, or I didn't know until you just talked about it this morning that Nellie was suffering from some dementia. She was 10 years younger than
She was about 10 years younger. This was a second wife. Grandpa had his first wife, who I of course didn't know, passed away suddenly, leaving him with two sons, Tom and Frank, and they had this wonderful looking lady, frail, elegant, little Nellie Gray, was living with her aunt in Morris. And we have a copy of the diary that she was keeping in those days, and they were talking about Dr. Harris, who came to call. He was courting her the old-fashioned way, with elegance and patience, and finally won her hand, and they were married, and she was an elegant lady. During World War II, she was the head of the Red Cross. She was a volunteer, similar to all the ladies of these days, and raised 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. My dad's family was well raised, educated, had good, strong sense of values, and the family reunions we used to have, in my memory, were absolutely the most fun you could imagine. They all loved each other and got along well and talked shop. They were all dentists, except for the oldest, Uncle Frank. Tom had died early at the age of 20 and was not around anymore, but Frank always came to the family reunions.
He started out in dental school.
He started out in dental school, but he didn't like it at all. Went to work for the railroad, and that was his life's work. Yeah. As a matter of fact, that's what did him in, was a railroad accident.
Yeah.
But they all sat around talk, and I used to think that was so boring. But now that I am in that same avocation, why the sitting around and talking, which can be boring, is the most stimulating for me in the last few years in our family reunions.
There's a question here about if you could go back to you when you were 18, what advice would you provide that 18-year-old? And you wrote, more patience in administrating savings projects. I was too aggressive and lost ground.
Now, the groundwork for that statement was laid by my father when he was a single man in Roseville. He was investing in bonds that were bringing about 2% interest. And at that time, he had started out on a magnificent saving program that was going to realize an income of about $150 a month at his retirement age, which he said would provide a living like a king. But of course, he hadn't there hadn't been much of any inflation up to that point, and that was what ground up my father's retirement, or my grandfather's retirement, and my father's, and I vowed at that point that there would be more ways of accumulating enough wealth and protecting against inflation. So when I started saving money, I said, I'm not going to do like my father. I think that he was too conservative. I was probably a little too aggressive. There's some happy ground in there, and that's what the question asked. If you were 18, what advice would you give? I would say, you know, at that point, the answer to the question is regular saving and a lot more patience than I had. I went at it too hard and had some disappointments. But who's to say? I've got a wonderful life, great family, and we are very proud to be where we are right now. But there could have been a little bit better management by me being a little bit less aggressive on the investment.
Your investment strategy, well,
Yeah.
I'd say relative to everything else, that's pretty minor.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't too bad. We're in fine shape, but we got our health. Health is wealth. We got
Yeah.
a great family that we're proud of, and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and it's a real sense of satisfaction and pride.
I'm kind of running out of
That's about it.
notes here.
I can't think of anything that might be appropriate. I've told all my stories that I can think of, but of course things come to mind.
Okay, what are your strongest memories from your time in the military? Robbie was talking about when you were in the military, you were obviously very mechanically inclined and
Oh,
did
yeah.
a lot of your own auto repair work, and you were in a hangar or something,
Yeah,
repairing a car, and you had grease up to your elbows. And
yeah.
what's
That's a funny story, but you know, in high school we had this Model T. Jerry Huckabo and I went into partnership, and Jerry Huckabo's brother-in-law was Charlie Christensen, who was the county superintendent of schools, and he provided Jerry with a job at the courthouse, helping. He was kind of doing some bookwork or something during high school, so he had some money. And I had been working on a farm and money at the grocery store, so for $15 each, we bought us a Model T. And we bought it from Alan Atteen, brother of Edgar Atteen, and who had started Polaris. Anyway, he ended up buying it back from us after we got tired of it. But we had a Model T that we learned how an engine worked. We used to have to take it apart. We'd lay the whole car on its side. It had a wooden body, homemade body. Lay the car on the side, pull the pan off, work on the rod bearings, tighten them up, put it back into action, and then away we'd go. So when I got into the service, we were stationed at a place in Omaha, Nebraska, off at Air Force Base, where they had a hobby shop where in our spare time we could work on cars. And so I bought an old, this was in 1953, I bought a, what do you suppose that is? That's a 25-year-old car, a Model A coupe, and went to work and restored it. I polished up the body, overhauled the engine, did all that stuff, and they had a movie there, the world premiere of the movie Strategic Air Command was to be held in Omaha. The star of the movie was Jimmy Stewart, And they had another actor in there by the name of Frank Lovejoy, who had a pretty prominent part. And what they were doing, I think Frank Lovejoy played the part of General LeMay, because he did kind of look like him. But anyway, General LeMay was proud of his hobby shop. And he brought Jimmy Stewart, and he was showing him the hobby shop, among other things, around on the Air Force Base while they were waiting for the world premiere movie to be held that night in downtown Omaha. And I remember we all went to it with our dress uniforms. The theater was full of the Air Force personnel that were stationed at Offutt Air Force Base that night. And we all sat there and watched the world premiere. But General LeMay was guiding Jimmy Stewart around in the hobby shop, and a guy by the name of General Powers was guiding Frank Lovejoy. And they came by my station there where I was working on the muffler system of the Model A for some reason. I don't remember why, or maybe I had the head off and I was doing some work on it. But anyway, I was greasy from up to my elbows. And General Powers asked Frank Lovejoy, he says, now what do you suppose this guy does in the service? And Frank Lovejoy had no answer, but how do I know? But anyway, General Powers says, he's a dentist. And the look on Frank Lovejoy's face was unbelievable. I would like to have had a picture. But I had one of my units that I took care of as far as their dental care was the 4701 or whatever it was called, field maintenance. These were the mechanics that worked on airplanes or tanks or whatever it was, whatever machinery we had on the base. So all these guys would come in to the office for their dental work, and they would, to a man, they'd always say, geez, you know, that Model A doesn't taste too bad. I worked on their wives. You know, they had, you know, we didn't have dependent care, but late in the evening we had shifts. Sometimes we were on the late shift. We worked from 2:30 in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. So we'd sneak the wives in there and do a filling or polish something or you know, mostly just restorative work. And in return, I could get my work done on the side on my Model A. They'd take my head over there and plane it down a little bit, or if there was something wrong, weld a muffler or weld something. Or, you know, I had all those guys in my back pocket. So it helped. Well, the guy that painted it too, Jogish was his name, Sergeant Jogish, and he could paint. And he sprayed the coupe, and I got it all restored. So I got a lot of work done from those guys, and I returned the favor by doing some work for their wives.
And that was that green coupe.
The green coupe. We got pictures of it, the house I lived in
Yeah.
in
And
Bellevue, Nebraska.
Yeah, I've got a picture of Hudson parked in front of that Omaha
Yeah.
house. I haven't seen a picture of that Model A parked there.
Yeah, the Hudson, I came from Roseau. It was a 51 model, and it was held over, they couldn't sell it. Step down Hudsons, they're all step downs now. They were way ahead of their time. And this Hudson Hornet was left over from the 51 sales. And so I bought it at the Hudson Garage. Can't remember their name right now. That thing would fly. It was winning all the stock car races. Had a 6-cylinder engine and would go 130 miles an hour on the road. I know because I tried it. And it was a bullet-shaped body on it. You still see some of those Hudsons around. It was a magnificent car, fast car. But it had no resale value. I don't know why. That was always the mark of a Hudson, was that you couldn't sell it if it was used. So anyway, I ended up trading it in for that gorgeous 55
Yeah.
Oldsmobile, two-door hardtop.
You buy that in Roseau?
I bought that in Omaha. I bought that just before I got out of the service. But
So
that was my story of the
Yeah,
the
but
Model A.
the Model A, then you brought back to Roseau.
Brought it back to Roseau. By that time, I had taken the four-cylinder engine out, put in a Ford 60-horse V8, which was supposed to give it a hot rod, it was turn it into a hot rod, but all it did was give it a kind of a rumble sound. We had straight pipes going out the back. It sounded like a hot rod, but it didn't have as much torque or speed as the four-cylinder engine had, so it was a mistake. So I ended up putting the four-cylinder back after a while, after a few years. But I ran it in Roseau for a number of years, and then when the family started to grow, I found a sedan body out in the country, bought it, brought it to town, took the coupe body off and threw it away, which was another one of my misguided ideas. And the Model A coupe would have been worth something today, but it isn't.
Yeah.
The sedan wasn't.
Yeah.
But the sedan accommodated
Was more
my whole
practical.
family.
All right, well, I think we probably can,
That's a long story.
we may be able to augment this at some future point.
Yeah. There are more stories that'll come
Yeah,
to mind.
but why don't we cut it off for now?
Good idea. Jan, we're occupying your house too long.